To get started, I want to say there's a number of members of the team I see here that are present. So I welcome any questions in the chat if we don't have time to do this at the end. So I'm going to be talking about a knowledge graph that we have built for tackling questions related to COVID-19. So some of the kind of questions that are still outstanding when it comes to COVID is, obviously relevant for this section, what compounds might target parts of the SARS-CoV-2 viral life cycle or parts of SARS-CoV-2 pathways implicated in infectivity. And particularly, how does this impact the progression of the disease, the symptoms and the disease pathophysiology? How does sequence variants in the virus modify infectivity? How does the environment infect both disease susceptibility and progress? And maybe even kind of like future focusing questions about where does the next threat come from? But, as we all know, many of the challenges here involve the fact that, a lot of the data that we need is siloed in different databases. So part of the challenge is really taking what we might look at as a kind of a jigsaw puzzle that has been kind of like strewn all over the floor and trying to put the pieces together to build an integrated picture of all of the different aspects of SARS-CoV-2, both its kind of like molecular and physiological aspects, together with clinical and other aspects of the disease. So we set about building a knowledge graph, bringing together diverse information on COVID and SARS-CoV-2. So, I've illustrated a little section of the knowledge graph on the bottom left here. So this is the protein-protein interaction part of the graph, where we can see, for example, viral proteins such as NSP11 interacting with human proteins, TPCA2, which themselves form part of a protein-protein interaction network, from which we can kind of like traverse paths to look at what drugs may impact proteins that are part of that network. And we can use additional annotations on those, such as Go molecular functions, to try and understand the functional relevance of these. So we can essentially use this knowledge graph to look for things like mechanistic evidence that link particular drugs to parts of the viral life cycle. So, the knowledge graph itself is, we're hoping to build it something that is very comprehensive, high quality, follow all the FAIR principles. We do have a molecular and cellular focus, but, we're open to including other, kinds of clinical data in the knowledge graph. We have regular releases, and we're constantly adding content to this graph. So because this is an ontology talk, I thought I'd dive a little bit into the actual underlying formalism we're using and what I exactly mean when I say knowledge graph here. So the formalism we use is it's not directly RDF-AL. We're using semantic labeled property graphs, SLPGs. And the main difference between this and RDF-AL is that you can annotate edges in the graph with information, with provenance, and actually with information that kind of alter the semantics of those edges as well. So we found there was actually, a lack of a kind of good kind of like serialization and exchange format for SLPGs. So we devised something called KGX. So KGX is both a format, and it comes with some command line tools for being able to slice and dice knowledge graphs. The primary serialization is a tabular TSV one, although you can also serialize as JSON. Semantically, you can think of this as roughly corresponding to RDF star. So RDF star is a kind of proposed extension to RDF that aims to bridge the RDF modeling worlds and the property graph modeling worlds. And there, because we still care deeply about RDF and AL, there are defined translations from KGX into AL back and forth. So we can take any existing AL ontology, turn it into KGX, and load it into our knowledge graph. We have a schema for our knowledge graphs. The schema we developed was actually not developed just for this project, but for a number of others. It is called BioLink. And you can view this, even though it's more of a data model, you can view it kind of like an upper ontology, like the OBO core ontology for biology COB project. So there's a little section of it from Protege on the right here. And the little diagram on the bottom left illustrates the SLPG formalism, where you can annotate edges such as spike interacting with ACE2 with not only provenance information and evidence, but perhaps also information about the strength of that connection. And there's a simpler way of modeling things rather than using kind of more complex OWL axioms, although they can be translated. So when building, we developed a framework for building the knowledge graph. It's in Python. We're taking a number of different kind of like molecular sources for this, including pathways. We have a formalism called GoCams for representing pathways using the gene ontology framework. We've got conversions from Reactome, bringing in intact interaction data, including the Gordon et al. Paper that was mentioned in the previous talk. And we, as part of our pipeline, we transform all of these different databases, file formats into KGX. And then we make releases in RDF-OWL. We also make a Neo4j release and a BlazeGraph release that we queried. And we envision this as really being part of a larger network of knowledge graphs that can be sliced and diced and remixed together, kind of like an oboe for KGs in a way. This Sankey plot kind of just gives you an idea not only of the two bars on the left, give you an idea of the connections between the different types using the biolink types, with the column on the right showing the source of those connections. So you can see a large set of what we bring in are actually kind of NLP annotations, and we're thankful to the SciBite team for making available their NLP and NER annotations on the COVID-19 corpus. So we have this deployed in a number of places. One of the most notable is in this new National COVID Cohort Collaborative N3C collaboration, which is spanning, I think, all the 56 different CTSAs across the USA, really aiming to and being successful in bringing together clinical research data about COVID across the whole US. So we actually have the knowledge graph deployed in something called the NCAT Secure Data Enclave as part of N3C. And this is being used, for example, to kind of like explore, hypotheses about things that are observed in this underlying data, such as, where drugs are kind of observed from the clinical data to have some kind of like impact on COVID progression, trying to build hypotheses about why that might be the case. So even though the knowledge graph can be used as a query source in its own right, we're really interested in building new methods for being able to make inferences over these knowledge graphs. So we've developed a library called MBigen. This effort is really led by a number of people from University of Milan, Jackson Laboratory, and this is a knowledge graph embedding library written in Rust, which makes it super fast. And we can use this library to essentially take knowledge graphs in the KGX format, generate embeddings from which you can kind of like do things like make t-SNE plots, look at the cosine similarity of entities within it. And you can use kind of like, classical machine learning or neuro deep learning techniques using the embeddings as substrates and inputs for those kinds of classifiers. And so, one example of something that we have done using this is essentially ranking drug candidates for repositioning based on their cosine similarity to the SARS-CoV-2 node within the network. And this is a sample here of some of the I think the top 5 kind of like results using this kind of method. So we're ranking kind of like drug candidates like sunitinib, lopinavir, and just looking at some of the literature on some of these drugs, then it seems to be that these are actually fairly kind of like good candidates, maybe under investigation elsewhere for their utility in COVID. So some of the take homes here are that we believe that knowledge graphs provide an ideal substrate for doing machine learning. They allow you to kind of like essentially embed nodes from the graph that allow you to make use of standard deep learning and machine learning techniques. knowledge graphs can be used to rank some of these drug candidates for drug repositioning. And in particular, the SLPG formalism, I think, provides an appropriate formalism for doing operations on these kinds of knowledge graphs. We are still interested in, of course, in OWL, particularly for its use in kind of inference, but I think more work needs to be done in figuring out how we can combine these different modes of inference, the kind of like kind of OWL inference that we use within the ontology world, and more kind of machine learning types of inference. And I think there's a number of unfortunately I didn't have time to go into some of the other kind of like knowledge graphs out there doing kind of like complementary work, but I think we really need to do what many of us have kind of like done on the ontology side of things, where we need to really kind of like unify our efforts and bring some of these knowledge graphs together. Of course, we leverage OBO where possible in our knowledge graphs, but we need to go beyond ontologies to get a wide range of named entities and linkages between them. And so we really need some kind of parallel effort like OBO for knowledge graphs. And I've got some links down below for more discussion on some of these take homes. So if you are interested, all of our source code is completely open source. It's available on GitHub from our Knowledge Graph Hub organization. We have a site for releases where you can download this in either the native KGX format, which is a simple TSV format, or in RDF on OWL. We've got a Sparkle endpoint that you can kind of like query, do federated queries on. And then we have a link here for our nascent kind of KG Hub project. And you can read more about this project on paper. We just have I think a new release up on bioRxiv right now, and it's been accepted for publication in Cell Press Patterns. And so with that, I'd really like to thank the team of people involved. There's a lot of people involved in both building the knowledge graph itself and on developing some of the machine learning techniques across a variety of sites. Particularly thankful to internal funding from Berkeley Lab and to donations from Google Compute, Google Cloud for computing. And I just want to note also we are hiring at the moment. So if you're interested, please kind of contact me at the soonest opportunity. And with that, I'll take any questions.